It was one of those mornings in Paris where the city seemed to hum with anticipation. Yet beneath the usual glamour of the French capital, tension was quietly building. On the surface, the Balenciaga Spring/Summer 2026 women's wear show promised elegance, couture extravagance, and the soft clatter of heels on polished floors. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Yet, behind the velvet ropes and flashing cameras, a drama was unfolding that nobody anticipated. One that would shake the foundations of the British royal family and reveal a side of Princess Meghan rarely seen in public. Meghan Markle arrived that morning, dressed head to toe in white, a monochromatic statement that was both striking and serene. The ensemble seemed to signal purity, calm, and control. Yet the story about to unfold would prove that appearances, as always, were deceiving. The Duchess of Sussex had stepped out in front of the waiting paparazzi with the confidence of a woman who had conquered international fame. But what no one could foresee was that this very day, a set of hotel bills would surface that would set Prince Harry off in a way that had never been publicly witnessed. The figures, innocuous on paper, told a story that went far beyond numbers, hinting at secrets, loyalties, and tensions that had been quietly simmering behind closed doors. As the camera lenses clicked incessantly, Meghan navigated the airport with poise, her posture impeccable, her smile calm yet knowing. Observers couldn't help but notice the luxury carried in every detail. The gleaming designer handbag, the delicate jewelry that caught the morning light just enough to remind everyone that she was royalty by title, if not entirely by temperament. Yet, even as she made her way through the throngs of photographers and onlookers, whispers of curiosity floated through the air. Who had paid for this extravagant trip? Was it Prince Harry, as most would assume? Or had someone else quietly footed the bill, shielding the Duchess from scrutiny while simultaneously planting the seeds of a scandal waiting to explode? The answer, as it turned out, would not remain hidden for long. The hotel in question, a five-star Parisian retreat with a history of hosting royalty, celebrities, and the elite, had inadvertently sparked a chain reaction. Somewhere in the labyrinthine system of invoices, receipts, and internal staff notes, the truth about Meghan's stay had leaked. What might have seemed trivial to an average traveler, a night in a suite, a private chauffeur, perhaps a meal or two charged to the room, had taken on a new weight when the sums were laid bare. Thousands of euros had been spent, seemingly without consideration, and it became clear that someone had been paying for Meghan in a way that broke the usual rules of royal etiquette. Prince Harry, ever the protective husband, was the first to learn of the details. What started as a casual conversation with a palace aide quickly escalated into full-blown fury. Imagine a man who has spent his life in the glare of public scrutiny, yet who also harbors a deep-seated loyalty to his family and his wife. The news of the hotel bills, combined with the subtle hints of gossip from the Parisian press and royal insiders, triggered an outburst that, though private at first, would ripple across continents. The words reportedly used in that confrontation were explosive, unfiltered, and filled with the raw emotion of a man feeling both betrayed and blindsided. The phrase, "you're a cheap slut," would, according to sources, escape his lips, not in the heat of public debate, but in the charged, private moments where truth and frustration collide. The middle of this story lies not just in the figures themselves, but in what they represent. The hotel bills became a prism through which larger issues came into focus. Questions of trust, financial transparency, public image, and the delicate balancing act of personal loyalty versus public expectation. Each euro spent, each service charged, became a symbol of a tension between the private and the public, between the role of a duchess and the persona of a celebrity. The world, as always, is quick to judge, to assign motives and character flaws based on fragmentary information. And yet, within this unfolding drama, there were nuances that few would notice without looking closely. There were the quiet whispers of the staff, the side glances from fellow guests, the raised eyebrows of Parisian society insiders who had seen this pattern before and understood its implications more deeply than any headline could convey. Amidst all this, Meghan carried herself with the precision of someone who had mastered public appearances. There was a reason she had become a figure both admired and scrutinized. She understood optics, how to control the narrative, how to make every appearance count. Her white ensemble at the Balenciaga show was more than fashion. It was a statement of intent. Yet, no designer could shield her from the truth leaking through the administrative cracks of a luxury hotel. The bills, once examined, suggested a generosity or a lack of restraint that would ignite Harry's outrage. For him, the matter was simple. Honesty and transparency mattered more than extravagance. And yet, the situation revealed an uncomfortable contradiction. Here was Meghan, celebrated for her independence and poise, yet entangled in a financial situation that suggested reliance on unseen benefactors, hidden privileges, and choices that may not have been fully aligned with her husband's expectations. As the story continued to develop, the tension in Paris was mirrored by a growing curiosity worldwide. Social media began to pick up on the hints of scandal even before the formal reports appeared. Commentators, fashion bloggers, and royal enthusiasts dissected every image, every post, every snippet of information, asking, who really paid? Why would anyone go to such lengths? What does this reveal about Meghan Markle's position within the royal family and her relationship with Harry? The questions multiplied, each feeding into the suspense, each ensuring that the public's fascination would only grow. By the time Meghan stepped out for the Balenciaga show, the city was already buzzing with a sense that something significant had occurred behind the scenes. A narrative of luxury, loyalty, and tension, wrapped in the guise of a fashion trip. This is where the introduction begins to reach its emotional core. Beyond the outfits, the hotels, and the flashing cameras, the story is about human emotion. Pride, frustration, loyalty, and the often messy intersection of personal and public life. Prince Harry's anger is not simply about money. It is about principles, about feeling blindsided by a situation he believed should have been transparent. Meghan's poise is not simply about style. It is about control, about maintaining an image that aligns with both her aspirations and the expectations of a world watching closely. The unfolding drama thus becomes a case study in how public figures navigate crises, how personal relationships are tested by external pressures, and how small details, like a hotel bill, can ignite conflicts with outsized consequences. By the end of the introduction, the audience should feel as if they have been placed in the midst of this story. Standing on the marble floors of a Parisian hotel, hearing the clatter of heels, sensing the invisible tension in the air, and understanding that every gesture, every decision, every charged word contributes to a narrative larger than the sum of its parts. The stakes are not only personal but also symbolic, touching on issues of reputation, loyalty, and the high-stakes scrutiny faced by those in the public eye. The introduction closes by teasing what comes next. Revelations about the hotel bills, the exact sequence of events that led to Harry's explosive confrontation, and the broader implications for both the royal family and Meghan's carefully curated public persona. Viewers are left on the edge of their seats, wondering how such a seemingly ordinary event, a luxury trip to Paris, could spiral into a confrontation that would expose truths, hidden loyalties, and secrets far beyond what anyone imagined. The morning sun had barely begun to brush the rooftops of Paris with its golden glow when Meghan Markle's private jet touched down at Le Bourget Airport. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of freshly baked croissants from nearby cafes, but nothing could compete with the spectacle that awaited her arrival. From the moment she stepped onto the tarmac, it was clear that this was no ordinary trip. Security personnel moved with precision, coordinating seamlessly to clear a path through the bustling airport. Photographers had already positioned themselves strategically, their cameras poised like predators waiting for the first glimpse of royalty. Meghan emerged from the sleek black vehicle that transported her from the jet, dressed in a pristine all-white ensemble. Every detail of her outfit seemed carefully curated to convey elegance and understated dominance. A tailored blazer hugged her figure perfectly, paired with wide-legged trousers that swept the ground with each step. Her shoes were chic yet discreet, practical enough for walking the polished airport floors, yet stylish enough to catch the glint of camera flashes. A delicate chain around her neck bore a subtle emblem, an accessory that seemed almost innocuous, but added to the overall narrative of status and sophistication. As she moved forward, Meghan's expression was calm, almost serene, but beneath that calm lay a palpable awareness. She knew she was being watched, analyzed, and judged in real time. Every step, every gesture, every small adjustment of her hair or handbag would be scrutinized and dissected by the world. This awareness was a hallmark of her public life, a skill perfected over years of being in the spotlight, but even the most seasoned public figure can feel the weight of the gaze when surrounded by the relentless energy of an international press corps. The scene was surreal, almost cinematic, and yet, for Meghan, it was another day navigating the paradoxical expectations of her position. She was both an outsider and a symbol of glamour. A woman who had once been celebrated for her independent career as an actress, she was now a figure whose every move reflected both personal agency and the collective scrutiny of the public. Questions whispered through the air. Who was funding this trip? Was this a personal indulgence, a professional obligation, or something more complex? The vehicle pulled up to a waiting convoy of luxury cars, each black and meticulously polished. The coordination was meticulous, reflecting the high-level planning that accompanies the arrival of a royal or high-profile celebrity. Inside, chauffeurs remained silent, their eyes on the road but alert to every movement outside. Meghan stepped from the car with grace, her presence commanding attention without seeming to demand it. The crowd responded almost instinctively. Flashes erupted in rapid succession, the low murmur of speculation filled the air, and a sense of anticipation hung heavy, signaling that something beyond fashion was about to unfold. By the time she reached the hotel, the narrative of her arrival had already taken shape. Word of Meghan's travel plans had leaked to select media outlets, a strategic, or perhaps accidental, reveal that set tongues wagging about the luxury of her accommodations. The hotel itself was a five-star palace of classic Parisian architecture, with marble floors, gilded moldings, and crystal chandeliers that refracted the early morning light into a kaleidoscope of color. Such hotels are accustomed to accommodating royalty, celebrities, and global dignitaries. But even here, Meghan's presence created a stir. Staff moved efficiently, anticipating her needs, from the precise arrangement of luggage to the discreet preparation of suites with everything from fresh flowers to preferred linens. The suite assigned to Meghan was a marvel of understated luxury. Panoramic windows offered a view of the Seine, and the interior design blended classic French elegance with contemporary comfort. The plush furnishings, designer accents, and technology seamlessly integrated into the space reflected not only wealth, but also an attention to detail befitting someone accustomed to high standards. Yet, the story behind the suite, the arrangements, the payments, the hidden sponsorships, was about to become the focal point of a scandal that would capture global attention. As Meghan settled briefly in her suite, aides quietly unpacked essentials, ranging from wardrobe selections for the upcoming Balenciaga show to personal items meticulously prepared for travel. Every detail mattered. The placement of items, the timing of departures, even the selection of perfumes had significance, not merely as luxury indulgences, but as symbols of control and image management. This is where appearances met reality. The world saw grace and elegance, but the undercurrents of financial responsibility, personal expectation, and potential friction were already forming beneath the surface. The question that lingered was unavoidable. Who was footing the bill? The answer, hidden in the receipts and invoices, was soon to trigger a reaction from Prince Harry that no one would forget. Luxury, when not fully understood or transparently handled, can become a weapon as much as a shield. The juxtaposition of public admiration and private scrutiny created a tension that would explode once the details of payment came to light. Even the small interactions upon her arrival added to the unfolding drama. The hotel concierge greeted Meghan with a mixture of reverence and quiet curiosity. A fleeting glance toward the unseen invoices suggested an awareness that the sum involved was significant. Staff members whispered behind closed doors, some speculating about who had authorized the expenses, others guessing whether these arrangements were standard for royal visitors or a special accommodation unique to Meghan. Each detail was meticulously noted, forming the backdrop against which the future confrontation would erupt. The narrative of Meghan's Paris arrival also intertwined with broader patterns of public fascination. Observers from social media and global news outlets immediately began to analyze every photograph. Comparisons were drawn to past royal visits, other celebrity fashion trips, and luxury escapades. Yet none seemed to capture the complex mix of intrigue and familial tension that would soon come into focus. Comments online reflected the duality of perception. Admiration for her poise and elegance contrasted sharply with speculation about the ethics and implications of financial responsibility. This public discourse amplified the tension, ensuring that the story would not remain confined to private corridors, but would instead ripple across continents and digital platforms. By the time Meghan was escorted to her suite and briefly allowed a moment of respite, the stage was set for the unfolding drama. The contrast between the visual perfection of the trip and the hidden turmoil underneath created a narrative rich in tension, curiosity, and emotion. Every element, from the architecture of the hotel to the precision of her entourage, played a role in a story that was about to escalate dramatically. The world would soon learn that luxury and image management, while carefully orchestrated, could not insulate a public figure from the very human consequences of secrecy, miscommunication, and the inevitable confrontation that would arise when personal and financial boundaries intersected. This was more than a trip. It was a catalyst, a spark that would ignite emotions, reveal hidden dynamics within the royal family, and set the stage for a confrontation that would shock those closest to Meghan as well as the public at large. Observers would come to understand that even in the midst of glamour, there is vulnerability. Even in the presence of meticulous planning, there is room for explosive emotion. And even in moments that seem purely aesthetic, the undercurrents of loyalty, responsibility, and trust shape the narrative in ways that no one can fully predict. The Parisian morning, with its golden light and quiet anticipation, marked the beginning of a story that would bridge continents, challenge perceptions, and reveal truths long hidden behind the curated veneer of royalty and celebrity. Meghan's arrival was the opening act in a saga that would expose fissures, ignite emotions, and ultimately lead to a confrontation between husband and wife over something as seemingly mundane as a hotel bill, an object that would come to symbolize far more than its monetary value. The audience is left with a vivid sense of anticipation. The stage is set, the players are in position, and the first hints of scandal and confrontation are visible on the horizon. Everything from her arrival, her poise, and the meticulous arrangements foreshadows the dramatic sequence of events that will follow, ensuring that viewers remain engaged and ready to follow the narrative as it escalates into the explosive revelation of who really paid for Meghan Markle's Paris trip. Paris, often celebrated as the epicenter of fashion, was buzzing with anticipation that morning, yet nothing in the city's famed elegance could compare to the spectacle that awaited inside the Palais de la Mode, where Balenciaga's Spring-Summer 2026 womenswear show was set to unfold. The building itself was an architectural marvel. Soaring ceilings, minimalist walls accented with bold lighting, and floors polished to a reflective shine that amplified the energy within. Fashion insiders, celebrities, influencers, and journalists had gathered from around the globe, each bringing their own expectations, expertise, and curiosity. Yet, amid the throng of designers, stylists, and press, one guest's arrival was the true focal point: Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex. The atmosphere backstage was a complex ballet of chaos and precision. Models in couture dresses fluttered around. Makeup artists moved with frenetic grace, and stylists ensured that every ensemble was flawlessly aligned with the designer's vision. The air smelled faintly of hairspray, perfume, and freshly steamed fabric, a combination both intoxicating and tense. Every detail mattered. Designers checked their lists repeatedly, assistants adjusted hemlines, and photographers jostled for the perfect angle to capture the first glimpse of each model. Yet, even as this whirlwind of preparation unfolded, whispers of Meghan's attendance rippled through the staff. Some speculated about how her presence might shift the dynamic of the show. Others were curious how the Duchess's wardrobe and entourage would integrate with the intricate choreography of fashion's most elite event. Meghan's entrance was meticulously planned. She arrived in a sleek black vehicle, subtly understated against the dramatic backdrop of paparazzi flashes and excited onlookers. Her all-white ensemble contrasted sharply with the darker tones of the venue and the model's elaborate garments. The blazer, trousers, and minimalist accessories projected an image of composed elegance, signaling not only her taste but also her understanding of optics. Her presence was immediately noted by the Balenciaga staff, who recognized that accommodating a royal of her stature required more than simple protocol. It demanded near-invisible precision. Security discreetly cordoned off a private path, ensuring that Meghan could move through the crowds unimpeded, yet without drawing overt attention to the orchestration of her passage. The front row, a coveted position at any fashion show, was reserved for the most influential guests: fashion editors, celebrities, and industry insiders whose social media posts could shape public perception in real time. Meghan's seat, strategically positioned to capture both her engagement and the audience's attention, became a symbol of both power and scrutiny. The juxtaposition was delicate. A duchess whose public persona demanded attention, yet whose presence needed to be integrated seamlessly into a carefully curated spectacle. Every detail mattered, from the way the chair faced the runway to the subtle lighting that highlighted her presence without overshadowing the models. As the show began, the models emerged one by one, showcasing Balenciaga's latest creations with precision and poise. The audience was captivated, but Meghan's presence seemed to elevate the drama of each ensemble. Every turn of a hemline, every subtle movement of fabric, seemed to interact with her aura, drawing attention in ways that subtly shifted the energy of the room. Yet, behind the elegance, backstage tensions simmered. Stylists had to coordinate Meghan's timing with the models' entrances and the lighting team's cues. Any misstep could be magnified under the intense scrutiny of both press and public. Staff exchanged nervous glances, aware that the arrival of a royal guest, while prestigious, carried its own set of pressures and potential complications. Midway through the show, a minor wardrobe glitch threatened to disrupt the flow. A hemline had become slightly uneven, a delicate silk panel caught in a seam. The stylist, noticing the error, signaled discreetly to Meghan's aid. With the grace that had become her trademark, Meghan adjusted the outfit with a subtle hand movement, maintaining poise while averting what could have become a distracting incident. Observers in the audience, unaware of the backstage maneuvering, interpreted the moment as effortless elegance, reinforcing her reputation as a figure who seamlessly navigated high-pressure environments. Yet, the real drama was not on the runway, it was behind the scenes. Rumors began to circulate among staff and fashion insiders about the financial arrangements surrounding Meghan's visit. The hotel bills, the private transport, the lavish accommodations, and the personal assistants, all part of a carefully orchestrated trip, were becoming a source of quiet concern. Who had covered these expenses? Were they in line with royal protocol, or had certain privileges been extended informally? The questions, while seemingly administrative, carried implications for loyalty, perception, and interpersonal dynamics between Meghan and Harry. Staff exchanged hushed comments, aware that the unfolding scenario could become headline news at any moment. The backstage energy intensified further when other celebrities arrived. Influencers live-streamed moments from the wings, journalists whispered updates to editors, and photographers jostled for position to capture reactions. Meghan's attention to her surroundings was subtle but sharp. She noted each photographer, each staff member, and each movement with the awareness of someone trained to maintain composure under intense scrutiny. The spectacle of the runway merged with the spectacle of public perception, creating a dynamic interplay that highlighted the power of optics in shaping narrative. As the show drew to a close, Meghan's exit was planned with the same meticulous care as her entrance. Security again formed an invisible barrier, ensuring that she moved through the crowd with minimal disruption. Yet, even in her departure, the tension lingered. Staff knew that the story of the hotel bills, the expenses, and Harry's impending reaction was waiting to surface. The juxtaposition of glamour and conflict created a sense of suspense that even seasoned insiders found compelling. This was not merely a fashion event. It was a narrative in motion, where appearances, finances, and human emotion intersected in ways that would soon erupt into scandal. The post-show environment also reflected the layered complexity of the day. Invitations to after-parties, private gatherings, and networking events swirled around the attendees. Yet Meghan's schedule was carefully calibrated to maintain discretion. Every appearance, every interaction, every brief conversation was an opportunity to shape perception. The intricate dance of public image, private loyalty, and financial responsibility became palpable, as if each element of the day were a note in a larger, suspenseful composition that would crescendo in the days to follow. Observers, both on-site and across social media, began piecing together the narrative, noting the subtle signs of tension and the careful choreography of Meghan's presence. Comments speculated on her wardrobe choices, the strategic positioning in the front row, and even her demeanor during interactions with designers and other guests. Behind this curated elegance, however, the real story was quietly simmering. The revelation of hotel bills, the questions of who paid for her lavish accommodations, and the emotional consequences that would soon impact her relationship with Prince Harry. By the end of the show, the audience was left with a clear understanding that this event was more than a display of fashion. It was a high-stakes intersection of glamour, loyalty, and emerging scandal. Meghan's ability to navigate the pressures of public appearance, backstage complexity, and personal tension highlighted both her skill and the underlying fragility of human emotion under scrutiny. The narrative set the stage for the next act in the story, the confrontation between appearance and reality, between expectation and personal dynamics, and ultimately, the explosive revelation of who really footed the bill for her extravagant Parisian trip. The chapter concludes with the sense that while the public witnessed a flawless presentation of style and grace, the undercurrents of tension, financial intrigue, and personal loyalty had been quietly building, setting the stage for the dramatic fallout that would follow in the days to come. Luxury travel often comes with layers of discretion, but even the most carefully orchestrated plans can unravel with a single slip. For Meghan Markle's Paris trip, the leaks began quietly, almost imperceptibly, yet their consequences would soon erupt into full-blown scandal. The Duchess had arrived in the city in style, attended the Balenciaga Spring-Summer 2026 show, and maintained a flawless public image. But behind the scenes, a small chain of events, an invoice here, a note there, would become the catalyst for one of the most talked-about royal confrontations in recent memory. The hotel itself, a five-star Parisian landmark accustomed to accommodating royalty and global celebrities, maintained meticulous records for every guest. Luxury suites, private chauffeurs, bespoke meals, and personalized services were all itemized, usually kept strictly confidential. Yet, for reasons still debated among staff, certain financial records related to Meghan's stay were inadvertently exposed. Perhaps it was a misfiled invoice, an administrative oversight, or a moment of careless sharing between staff and external auditors. Whatever the origin, the information quickly moved beyond the confines of the hotel administration. In the world of high-profile hospitality, even the smallest leak can generate ripples with far-reaching consequences. The contents of the bills themselves were staggering, though not necessarily surprising to anyone familiar with luxury Parisian rates. Suite charges ran into thousands of euros per night, with additional fees for security, private dining, and specialized amenities. The total expenditure, when aggregated, suggested that someone, whose identity was initially obscured, was footing the bill on a level of generosity that exceeded typical royal protocols. For the palace aides reviewing these records, the numbers were eyebrow-raising. For Prince Harry, who valued both transparency and discretion, they were explosive. News of the leak reached him through informal channels. An aide, attempting to summarize the details without causing alarm, inadvertently provided the prince with enough information to trigger a reaction. Harry's history with media scrutiny and financial transparency meant that he would not simply ignore this revelation. He knew that the bills did not just reflect money spent. They carried implications for public perception, personal trust, and the delicate balance between Meghan's independence and the couple's shared responsibilities. The moment he absorbed the details, the consequences became clear. A confrontation was inevitable. But before Harry's reaction, the leak itself generated quiet buzz among hotel staff and Parisian insiders. Conversations began with low, careful tones behind closed doors. Did you see the totals? One concierge reportedly asked another. Who would cover this? The questions were loaded, the answers uncertain. Staff members were aware that they were now participants in a story that could extend far beyond the walls of the hotel. Even minor details, room service orders, spa treatments, chauffeured trips, were scrutinized for their potential narrative weight. Within hours, the leak had transformed from an administrative error into a story with emotional, financial, and public significance. The timing could not have been more delicate. Meghan was in the midst of high-profile events, attending fashion shows, and maintaining a visible public image of composure and poise. The contrast between her polished appearances and the quietly circulating bills created a sense of tension that was almost palpable. Those who discovered the leak realized the potential consequences immediately. This was more than a story about money. It was a story about perception, control, and loyalty. A story that could redefine the narrative of Meghan's Paris trip and her relationship with Harry. The prince's initial reaction, though private, set the tone for the conflict that would soon spill into broader awareness. Imagine a man who has spent his life under public scrutiny, who understands the consequences of image and narrative, and who values honesty and shared responsibility. Learning that someone had quietly paid for expenses of this magnitude, without discussion or transparency, ignited a mixture of anger, frustration, and a sense of betrayal. According to sources, his first words were sharp and unfiltered, a rare glimpse into a level of emotion that is usually shielded from public view. The phrase reportedly used, though shocking to some, reflected the raw intensity of a man grappling with unexpected information about financial and personal trust. Yet the story of the bills also highlights the complexity of public perception. For outsiders, Meghan's trip appeared to be the height of glamour and control. Every photograph, every public appearance, reinforced a narrative of poise, independence, and style. But the invoices told a parallel story, one rooted in human emotion, administrative oversight, and the sometimes unpredictable consequences of high-profile travel. They revealed that even meticulously planned events are vulnerable to disclosure, and that transparency, or the lack thereof, can have far-reaching ramifications. By the time the details reached the press, the leak had already sparked speculation among journalists and royal watchers. Headlines hinted at scandal, yet the specifics were vague, creating a fertile environment for curiosity and rumor. Observers began dissecting images of Meghan's trip, her fashion choices, her entourage, and the hotel itself. Every flash of a credit card, every glimpse of a chauffeur, and every detail of her accommodations was examined as if it were evidence of a deeper narrative. The juxtaposition of visible glamour with hidden financial scrutiny created a tension that captured the public imagination and set the stage for the dramatic confrontation to follow. The unfolding drama also revealed the intricate web of relationships that govern royal and celebrity life. Who authorized payments? Which staff members were aware of the arrangements? Was this an extension of royal privilege, a personal decision by Meghan, or the generosity of an external party? Each possibility carried implications for loyalty, perception, and the boundaries of personal and public responsibility. Harry, already sensitive to issues of trust and fairness, perceived these questions not as abstract queries, but as challenges to the integrity of his relationship and the shared principles that had guided their life together. As the story gained momentum, the leak transformed from a simple financial disclosure into a lens through which larger dynamics were revealed. It highlighted differences in how Meghan and Harry approached public life, personal responsibility, and financial transparency. It revealed tensions between personal freedom and shared accountability, between appearance and reality, and between the cultivated image of glamour and the unavoidable scrutiny of the public eye. The hotel bills, innocuous on paper, had become a symbol of these underlying tensions, a touchstone for both emotional and public conflict. By the end of the leak's initial ripple, it was clear that this was more than a story about money. It was about trust, expectation, and the delicate intersection of private life and public perception. Staff, palace aides, journalists, and social media observers all became unwitting participants in a drama that would define not only Meghan's Paris trip, but also the emotional landscape of her marriage. The bills had revealed the unseen forces at play: loyalty, generosity, and the human reactions to perceived missteps, and had set in motion a confrontation that would soon demand resolution. This chapter closes with a sense of inevitability. The hotel bills, once confidential and mundane, had become the spark for conflict, curiosity, and scandal. The stage was set for Prince Harry's explosive reaction, for the ethical and emotional questions to surface, and for the broader story of Meghan's Paris trip to unfold in ways that would captivate the world. It was a quiet evening at Frogmore Cottage, yet the calm was about to be shattered. Prince Harry, normally composed in public, had just learned the full extent of the hotel bills from Meghan's Paris trip. The details, revealed through a combination of internal palace channels and staff confirmations, were staggering. Thousands of euros had been spent on a suite, chauffeurs, meals, and services that had far exceeded what Harry considered reasonable. To him, it wasn't just about money. It was about transparency, loyalty, and the underlying principle of shared responsibility in a marriage. The moment Harry confronted Meghan was reportedly intense, private, and emotionally charged. Imagine the tension in a room where two people, deeply connected yet facing a fundamental disagreement, confront truths they had each understood differently. Sources suggest that Harry's first words, unfiltered and raw, carried the weight of both shock and anger. "You're a cheap slut," he reportedly exclaimed, a phrase that would later circulate among palace insiders and, eventually, media outlets. The words, shocking as they were, captured the intensity of his emotions. Feelings of betrayal, frustration, and disbelief. But the argument itself was not merely a matter of finances. It was about principle. Harry had long valued honesty and transparency, particularly in matters that affected both his personal life and public image. The fact that these expenses had been accrued without his knowledge, or without the clarity of how they were being handled, struck him as both irresponsible and secretive. For a man accustomed to operating under scrutiny, this felt like a personal breach of trust. Every euro spent, every luxury service ordered, became a symbol of an unseen decision-making process that he had not been included in. Meghan, for her part, maintained a composure that had become second nature. Sources describe her as calm but firm, defending her choices with the confidence of someone who had long navigated both public perception and personal autonomy. She reportedly explained the logistics behind her Paris trip, detailing the coordination of her schedule, the involvement of professional aides, and the arrangements made to maintain a seamless appearance at the Balenciaga show. To her, the spending was practical, necessary for maintaining both security and public presence. To Harry, it represented a breach of mutual understanding. The room reportedly grew tense as the argument escalated. Voices, usually moderated and careful, became sharper. Words were exchanged not just about money, but about accountability, loyalty, and the emotional impact of secrecy. The hotel bills were no longer just numbers on paper. They were a symbol of deeper tensions between expectation and reality, between the responsibilities of public life and the needs of personal expression. Every itemized charge, from the suite's nightly rate to private chauffeur services, became a point of contention, a visible representation of the clash between perception and principle. Observers outside the room, though unaware of the exact words exchanged, would later describe the energy surrounding the confrontation as electric. Even in the absence of direct knowledge, palace aides, friends, and insiders sensed that something significant had occurred. Rumors began to circulate, quietly at first, suggesting that the normally controlled Prince Harry had reached a breaking point. The leaked hotel bills were the spark, but the underlying fuel had been building for months, tied to questions of independence, public scrutiny, and the pressures of maintaining a curated image. Analysts note that financial disputes in high-profile relationships often serve as proxies for deeper emotional conflicts. In this case, the argument was as much about trust as it was about money. Harry's frustration reportedly stemmed from a feeling that decisions had been made without consultation, that significant expenditures were obscured, and that public perception could be compromised. The argument, therefore, was layered: financial, emotional, and symbolic. It highlighted the challenges of balancing personal agency with partnership, particularly under the relentless gaze of the public eye. The aftermath of the confrontation reportedly left both parties emotionally drained. Harry, known for his protective instincts toward his family, struggled with the duality of anger and loyalty. Meghan, equally aware of the stakes, maintained her composure while internally processing the intensity of the exchange. Though private, the argument set in motion a series of events that would reverberate across multiple spheres: family dynamics, media narratives, and public perception. The hotel bills, initially mundane administrative documents, had become a lightning rod for emotional expression and public fascination. What made this confrontation particularly noteworthy was its emotional authenticity. In a world where royals are often trained to mask reactions, this argument revealed raw human emotion. It exposed vulnerabilities, highlighted the consequences of secrecy, and demonstrated the complexities of navigating personal disputes within highly visible lives. Sources emphasize that while the phrase Harry reportedly used shocked observers, it also reflected a broader narrative: the struggle to balance personal integrity, loyalty, and transparency in a life constantly under scrutiny. Meanwhile, the surrounding environment amplified the tension. Palace aides, though instructed to maintain discretion, could not fully contain speculation. Friends and associates, sensing the gravity of the confrontation, began piecing together fragments of information, each adding to the growing narrative that would eventually reach public awareness. Social media chatter, tabloid speculation, and insider leaks created an ecosystem in which a private argument transformed into a global story almost instantly. By the end of the evening, the confrontation had become more than an isolated emotional outburst. It had crystallized underlying tensions into a narrative that could no longer be contained. The hotel bills were no longer merely financial documents. They were symbols of trust, transparency, and the fragile balance of personal and public life. Harry's reaction, intense and visceral, underscored the human dimension behind royal protocols, media narratives, and public scrutiny. This chapter closes with a clear understanding that the hotel bills, seemingly mundane in nature, had become a trigger for one of the most emotionally charged exchanges in recent royal history. The confrontation highlighted the stakes of transparency, the complexity of high-profile relationships, and the profound consequences of secrecy, even in matters that might appear trivial on the surface. The audience is left anticipating the next chapter, uncovering exactly who paid these bills, how the information leaked, and the ripple effects that would continue to reverberate across both personal and public spheres. The question that had been quietly buzzing behind the scenes, the one that every insider, aide, and palace staff member was wondering, was simple yet explosive. Who really paid for Meghan Markle's Paris trip? On paper, it might have seemed like a straightforward question of bills and receipts. In reality, it was a tangled web of loyalty, secrecy, and strategic appearances that few were prepared to untangle. The moment the hotel invoices became known, speculation intensified. Some assumed Prince Harry had covered the costs, a gesture of marital generosity consistent with their high-profile lifestyle. Others, however, suspected that the Duchess herself had orchestrated a private arrangement, exercising her autonomy and ensuring that every detail of her trip aligned with her personal brand and public image. For palace insiders, the answers were more nuanced. Luxury travel for someone of Meghan's stature is rarely a matter of a single payment. Suites, private transportation, security, and services often involve multiple layers of sponsorship, personal payment, and institutional coverage. Yet, when combined, the total expenditure became staggering, raising eyebrows even among those accustomed to the extravagant standards of royalty. The precise breakdown of costs was difficult to discern at first, as invoices were scattered across hotel departments, travel agents, and private aides, each with a slightly different accounting method. As investigators, both formal and informal, began piecing together the puzzle, the narrative grew more complex. Some sources indicated that Meghan had arranged certain aspects of the trip herself, using personal funds to cover wardrobe, accessories, and styling fees. This was consistent with her image as a modern, independent woman, capable of managing her appearances and public engagements without relying exclusively on royal resources. Yet other charges, particularly related to the suite, chauffeur services, and security, were reportedly billed to accounts associated with Prince Harry or even external sponsors aligned with fashion or philanthropic connections. The combination of these different financial streams created a situation ripe for misunderstanding. From Harry's perspective, the lack of clarity was unacceptable. How could such a high-profile trip, with implications for both image and security, proceed without full transparency? From Meghan's perspective, the arrangements were practical, meticulously planned, and necessary for maintaining the seamless appearance required of a public figure of her stature. The disconnect between intent and perception became the fault line upon which the scandal would grow. To outsiders, the idea of a royal spouse relying on external sponsorship for travel might seem ordinary, even mundane, given the world of celebrity endorsements and luxury accommodations. But within the intimate dynamics of a marriage already under relentless public scrutiny, the revelation of multiple funding sources touched a nerve. Harry's reported anger was less about the financial numbers themselves than about what they implied. A lack of communication, potential dependence on third parties, and an erosion of mutual trust. The hotel bills, though objective in nature, had become a prism through which broader relational tensions were revealed. In parallel, media outlets and royal watchers began their own investigations. Analysts cross-referenced hotel records, flight manifests, and photographs from Paris to deduce who had funded specific elements of the trip. Leaks, whether intentional or accidental, hinted that not all expenses had been covered by the royal couple directly. Some suggested that fashion houses had stepped in to subsidize parts of Meghan's visit, a common practice in the industry, but one fraught with potential conflict when juxtaposed against the expectations of royal accountability. Others speculated that private friends or philanthropic allies had quietly contributed, motivated by loyalty, admiration, or strategic influence. The uncertainty fueled speculation and gossip in equal measure. Journalists reported conflicting accounts. One claimed that Meghan had fully funded her own accommodations. Another suggested Harry had paid most of the bills, while yet another hinted at external benefactors whose identities were deliberately kept confidential. Each version of the story carried its own implications, influencing public perception and shaping a narrative that would continue to grow in complexity. The ambiguity itself became part of the drama, a tension point between transparency, privacy, and the public's insatiable curiosity. Within the palace, aides attempted to clarify the situation, providing Harry with itemized accounts and receipts, hoping to defuse the growing tension. Yet the piecemeal revelations only intensified his frustration. Each new piece of information suggested that decisions had been made without his input, that the boundaries of financial responsibility were blurred, and that assumptions about who covered what had gone unexamined. For Harry, who valued clarity and shared decision-making, the lack of transparency was unacceptable. The hotel bills were no longer just a financial matter. They were evidence of a breakdown in communication and trust. Meanwhile, Meghan's team emphasized the practicality of her arrangements. High-profile travel, particularly in a city like Paris, requires attention to detail and proactive planning. Suites must meet security requirements, transportation must align with public appearances, and wardrobe logistics are crucial for seamless public presentation. From this perspective, the involvement of multiple funding sources, whether personal, royal, or sponsored, was both logical and necessary. The question, however, remained. Could these logistical necessities be reconciled with Harry's expectation of transparency and shared responsibility? The growing speculation also intersected with broader discussions about autonomy and control. Meghan's ability to manage her schedule, funding, and wardrobe was a reflection of her personal agency, yet it also illuminated the delicate balancing act of being part of a high-profile couple. Independence, when interpreted through the lens of secrecy or lack of communication, could be perceived as betrayal or irresponsibility. The hotel bills became more than a financial document. They were a symbol of the tension between personal autonomy and shared accountability. As the story unfolded, the public narrative began to coalesce. Social media commentary, celebrity gossip columns, and fashion blogs dissected the question of payment, often framing it as a morality tale about privilege, spending, and the unseen mechanics of luxury. Critics questioned whether Meghan's choices were extravagant or justified, While supporters highlighted the practical necessities of high-profile travel, the narrative was multifaceted. Financial intrigue, personal drama, public perception, and relational tension all intertwined to create a story that was impossible to ignore. The revelation of who really paid for Meghan's Paris trip thus became a fulcrum for broader discussions about transparency in relationships, accountability for expenses, and the challenges of maintaining trust under intense scrutiny. For Harry and Meghan, it was a moment that crystallized underlying tensions, forcing both to confront not only the specifics of the hotel bills, but also the broader dynamics of their partnership. For the public, it was an entry point into the complex interplay of finance, loyalty, and perception that characterizes the lives of the world's most scrutinized figures. By the end of this chapter, the audience is left with a heightened sense of suspense. The financial mystery is partially solved, yet many questions remain unanswered. Who ultimately bore the costs? Were there hidden sponsors or contributors? How did these arrangements reflect on the trust and communication between Harry and Meghan? The stage is set for the next chapter, exploring the reactions of the royal family and the broader implications of these discoveries. News travels fast in the royal world, and what started as a quiet leak of hotel bills quickly reached the inner corridors of the palace. Within hours of the information surfacing, whispers began to circulate among aides, senior staff, and members of the extended family. The usual protocols of discretion were strained under the pressure of the unexpected revelation. Even within the carefully controlled environment of the palace, the tension was palpable. How could such a significant expenditure for Meghan's Paris trip occur without Prince Harry's knowledge? And more importantly, how would this reflect on the royal family as a whole? The palace reaction was a delicate balancing act. Officials needed to maintain confidentiality, protect the dignity of the royals involved, and manage a situation that could easily escalate into a public scandal. Internal memos circulated, staff were briefed on what could be disclosed, and advisors began preparing statements to address potential media inquiries. The language used was cautious, measured, yet tinged with urgency. The appearance of a private financial matter threatening to disrupt the family's image was a scenario that required immediate attention. Every detail mattered, from the wording of internal communications to the way staff were instructed to respond to any leaks or press questions. King Charles reportedly received the news with a mixture of concern and strategic calculation. As monarch, he had long been aware of the complexities of public perception and the fragile nature of trust within the family. The idea that an expenditure, though minor in royal terms, had triggered Harry's anger was seen as a symptom of broader relational dynamics. Advisors emphasized the importance of maintaining internal stability while also controlling the narrative in the public eye. Every potential reaction was considered: how Harry might respond, how Meghan might justify her decisions, and how the media might interpret each nuance. Prince William, meanwhile, was said to have reacted with a blend of surprise and calculated skepticism. Observers noted that William's experience in handling media scrutiny and managing public perception made him particularly sensitive to situations where personal disputes could spill into public scandal. He reportedly encouraged a measured approach: investigate the facts, understand the financial arrangements, and prepare for any statements or clarifications that might become necessary. Yet, beneath the surface, there was an awareness that tensions between Harry and Meghan could affect the family's broader image and that any misstep could be magnified by social media and global reporting. Princess Anne, known for her directness and keen awareness of protocol, reportedly offered insights into the logistics and etiquette surrounding such expenditures. Her perspective emphasized the importance of maintaining both transparency and dignity, highlighting the delicate balance between private actions and public perception. Staff members working closely with and noted that her focus was not on the moral judgment of the spending itself, but on the potential for misunderstanding, miscommunication, and the public fallout that could arise from incomplete information. The palace environment, often a mix of tradition, hierarchy, and protocol, became a hub of speculation and quiet analysis. Senior aides discussed not only the financial details but also the emotional dynamics involved: Harry's reaction, Meghan's independence, and the broader implications for the couple's public image. These discussions were meticulous, considering the potential for the story to reach tabloids, social media platforms, and international news outlets. Every aspect of the narrative, from the size of the hotel suite to the subtleties of the couple's communication, was examined for its potential impact on reputation, relationships, and media perception. Within these private circles, the question of accountability loomed large. Some suggested that Harry should have been consulted on the arrangements, reflecting a traditional expectation of shared decision-making. Others argued that Meghan's autonomy in managing her own schedule and expenses was reasonable, given her established public persona and experience navigating high-profile events. The tension between these perspectives highlighted a fundamental challenge faced by modern royals: balancing individual agency with collective responsibility in a world where every action is scrutinized. As staff continued to assess the situation, rumors began to filter outward, though carefully controlled. Trusted insiders noted the unusual energy among palace aides, the way conversations shifted when Harry or Meghan were mentioned, and the subtle adjustments in protocol that reflected heightened sensitivity. The hotel bills, initially a mundane financial matter, had become a lens through which multiple layers of family dynamics, emotional tension, and public perception were viewed. Even small details, such as the timing of Meghan's Paris appearances or the coordination of her entourage, were reinterpreted in light of this emerging conflict. The broader implications of the palace reaction were significant. Advisors recognized that the story had the potential to influence not only public opinion but also internal family relations. Any misstep in handling the narrative could exacerbate tensions between Harry and Meghan, fuel media speculation, and invite criticism from both the public and other members of the royal family. Conversely, a careful, measured approach could mitigate the risk, preserve dignity, and maintain the family's cohesion. It was a high-stakes situation, balancing emotion, protocol, and public perception. Interestingly, the palace whispers also revealed differences in generational perspective. Older members, attuned to the traditions of discretion, viewed the leak as a breach of protocol that required careful management. Younger advisors, familiar with the immediacy of social media and public discourse, were acutely aware of how quickly speculation could spiral out of control. The interplay of these perspectives shaped the palace's strategy, highlighting the complexity of managing personal conflict within a family under constant global scrutiny. By the end of this chapter, the audience gains a vivid sense of the palace as both observer and participant. The financial leak had triggered internal alarms, revealed relational tensions, and highlighted the precarious balance between personal autonomy and collective responsibility. The narrative tension is amplified. While the world outside sees glamour, fashion, and celebrity, the palace corridors resonate with concern, analysis, and anticipation of what will unfold next. Every whispered conversation, every subtle adjustment in protocol, serves as a prelude to the revelations and confrontations that are still to come. This chapter concludes with the understanding that the palace's awareness and reaction are critical elements of the unfolding story. The stage is set for further developments. The Paris gossip, the staff revelations, and the intensifying scrutiny that will continue to put Meghan and Harry's relationship, decision-making, and public image under the microscope. The audience is left eager to see how these palace dynamics intersect with the scandalous revelations about who paid the bills and the emotional fallout from these discoveries. Paris, a city renowned for its glamour, elegance, and relentless curiosity, proved to be the perfect backdrop for a scandal quietly simmering beneath the surface of Meghan Markle's Balenciaga trip. While the Duchess appeared poised, elegant, and in control during public appearances, whispers began to circulate in quieter, less visible corners. Hotel lobbies, cafe tables, and behind the gilded doors of luxury suites. The story of the hotel bills had not only reached palace corridors but was now trickling into the ears of those who observed and facilitated Meghan's every move, creating a complex web of intrigue. At the hotel, staff spoke in hushed tones about the unexpected attention surrounding Meghan's stay. Receptionists, concierges, and housekeeping teams, accustomed to accommodating high-profile guests, sensed the unusual nature of this particular visit. The sums reflected in the bills were extraordinary, even by the standards of a five-star Parisian establishment. Each night in the suite, the private chauffeur services, and the personalized amenities added layers of curiosity and quiet speculation. Staff members debated the source of the payments, questioning whether they came from Harry, Meghan herself, external benefactors, or a combination of all three. These discussions, private yet charged with intrigue, hinted at deeper tensions that would soon become public knowledge.